Hello everyone. In this video I will be talking about what the t-test is, or sometimes called the student's t-test. The t-test is a commonly used statistical significance test. This means the t-test is one of the many tests that are used to compare means from datasets to see whether the difference in the means are statistically significant or not. Unlike the ANOVA test that looks at 3 or more datasets, the t-test is used for scenarios with 2 groups only. In the scenario in which scientists want to observe something, like say the height of an 18-year-old, they don't expect everyone to be the same size. Of course, most of the people are about the same height, but there will always be people who are taller or shorter than everyone else. And this difference in height is called variation, which we'll come back to later. Another thing we have to think about is how scientists observe things. So for example, how can you measure the height of an 18-year-old? Of course, you can measure every single 18-year-old, but as there's too many, that's simply impossible. That will take forever. Instead, we take a sample. Instead of measuring every single 18-year-old, we only measure a small number of them. The idea is that since most 18-year-olds will be the same height, we can assume that this sample will be like the population and will be set for all 18-year-olds. But this isn't always true. It is untrue because nature can be unpredictable and often has a lot of variation, especially in biology. So when we see a pattern, we don't know if it's a real pattern or if we just picked up a weird sample due to that natural variation. Let's say the average height of 18-year-olds in town A is an inch taller than the average height in town B. In this case, how do we know for sure that we didn't accidentally make an error and pick an unusual amount of tall kids in one of these samples? How do we know that the kids in town A really are taller than the kids in town B? How do we know that this difference isn't by chance alone? This is where the t-test comes in. It allows us to compare results in terms of the variation in means, allowing us to say in confidence either the kids in town A really are taller or that the difference in height is actually due to natural randomness in our samples. By the way, all tests have some sort of hypothesis that is by default accepted as true. This is called null hypothesis. All tests also have a hypothesis that disputes the null hypothesis called the alternative hypothesis. In the previous scenario, the null hypothesis would be that the kids in town A and the kids in town B are not really different in height, while the alternative hypothesis would say that the kids in town A are, for whatever reason, taller than the kids in town B. Given the data you have, a t-test gives you the probability that your alternative hypothesis is true and that the random data you have might be observed in the real world with another set of random data. Generally, the difference between the two averages are more likely to be significant when 1. The difference between the averages is large, and 2. The sample size is large, and 3. The standard deviation is low. You should only use the t-test if your data is normally distributed, which basically means your data is evenly distributed to either side of the mean. If your data is skewed and it is not even like this, then you should use another test. This even distribution of data can actually happen naturally, and especially often with things like heights of people, blood pressure, and test marks, to name a few examples. In conclusion, the t-test is adaptable to many datasets, but be sure to remember the criteria, and as this was only a general overview of what a t-test is, make sure to continue paying attention to the rest of my group's work.
Created using Powtoon.